Hello, and thank you for joining me at Spooky Reviews. I'm the Ghostess, and I think remakes get a bad name sometimes. New storytellers can provide fresh perspectives that honor and evolve the original tale. So to show my love for those that spun something old into gold, or at least made some improvements, I will be counting down the top 13 best horror remakes of all time. Let's begin with number 13. Halloween. I don't love Rob Zombie. He's a redneck Quentin Tarantino with a real visceral knack for translating suffering in the crassest way possible, but I do admire what he does. And I'm not such a slasher purist that I don't believe you can do a remake of a franchise with more retroactive continuity than Charmed. I really like what Rob Zombie was trying to do here, and while I don't find it to be 100% successful, I enjoyed a white trash bad seed approach to establishing a kid who might actually snap and kill his family. Number 12, The Grudge. This American remake does a fantastic job recreating the Japanese film's best moments. Now, I do think the original is hands down a superior movie, with creepier scares and better cinematography. I don't love the idea of remaking a foreign film, but setting it in the original film's country, and also casting it with all white American actors. However, they do sew the plot threads together in a more coherent cinematic way than the original. But having a higher budget doesn't hurt either in making it look a little better. Number 11, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Now, the original movie isn't exactly brilliant. It's weighed down by terrible narration and a bunch of cop slapstick that gives the whole film a bizarre tone, especially considering it's based on very real unsolved murders. Now, the 2014 version might technically be a sequel, but it does follow the original movie's plot beat for beat. This version removes a lot of what makes the 1976 version unwatchable, updating the kills while hanging on to the trombones. Number 10, The Ring. Another Asian remake that remains very faithful to the original. While I think the relationship between the mom and the son is done better in the Japanese version, the relationship between the mother and the ex-boyfriend is done better in the American one. The original has a melodramatic tone that Japanese horror tends to use that I don't quite respond to, while the remake has that non-reactive style to fantastical things American horror loves to use, which I find equally unrealistic. It takes the same plot points, but uses its own creepy imagery and ups the body count and shocks. It still has some fantastic scares, and there's a reason this adaptation launched the Asian remake craze of the early 2000s. Number 9, Evil Dead. The original Evil Dead is one of the best low-budget horror movies ever made, launching the careers of Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, who I love and worship as horror nerds should. I didn't think a remake needed to be made at all, especially considering Evil Dead 2 already exists. But this movie was clearly made with love and respect for the original, and it was well done at that. It follows a brother trying to help his sister kick heroin with help from their friends, which adds psychological layers to the ghoulish gore. The tonal shifts between goony and emotionally dramatic and creepy can be a little whiplash-inducing, but it holds up well. For being completely unnecessary, it still gets 2 thumbs way, way up. Number 8, Dawn of the Dead. I love Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and I love that the remake takes the source material in new and fun directions. The only real similarities are a zombie outbreak and they hold up in a mall, and then it does its own thing from there. Sarah Polley leads the misfit cast of strangers as they try to survive the apocalypse in Wisconsin. A fun ride, a cool soundtrack, and not one to be discounted. Number 7, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers is definitely top shelf as far as 50s horror goes, and it's iconic for a reason. but the 70s version is a classic in its own right and deserves space on that same shelf. The idea that someone you love can be secretly replaced by a replica always creeps me out, and this film really ups the tension. And the acting of Donald Sutherland, Veronica Cartwright, Jeff Goldblum, and even Leonard Nimoy don't hurt either. Where the original screams 1950s, the remake screeches 1970s, and it's fantastic. Number 6, Maniac. The original Maniac is mainly worth watching just to see early Tom Savini special effects, unless you're a big fan of Son of Sam exploitation movies. It has its place in horror cinema, and I respect that, but I won't pretend I'm a big fan. The Elijah Wood version uses cinematography in a very creative way to turn a gruesome gore fest into a darkly beautiful insight into the mind of a madman. High recommendation if you haven't already checked it out. Number 5, 13 Ghosts. Again, this movie isn't something I would ever really recommend overall. It suffers from a lot of early 2000s cliches and a ton of jump scares, but the original is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Both follow a family inheriting a strange house from a mysterious uncle. The effects in the 60s original are worse than those from the silent era, likely due to a marketing gimmick involving ghost vision glasses. The acting is bland, and the family reacts in the most bizarre ways to everything. The remake puts a lot of heart and soul into the original's premise, updating the plot in a very creative way, and the bonus features even show tragic backstories for all 13 ghosts. The set design is pretty kick-ass, and so is a cast including Matthew Lillard, Tony Shalhoub, and a lovely young Shannon Elizabeth. Dumb, but fun and enjoyable. Number 4, The House on Haunted Hill. Okay, I know some people really love the original version of this movie, but it was always just too dumb for me. It has a great premise. A group of strangers earn a fortune if they spend a night in a haunted mansion, but it's just so milquetoast. I love Vincent Price, but there is a giant skeleton marionette acid bath murder plot in this movie, and that's just too goony to be scary. The remake is just fun as hell. The effects don't always hold up, but a lot of it is still very creepy. The soundtrack is so early 2000s, but we've got Jeffrey Rush, Famke Janssen, Taye Diggs, Ali Larter, and even Chris Kattan giving good performances in a spooky fun ride with ghouls and gore. Highly recommended. Number 3, The Fly. The original The Fly is a passable 1950s film starring Vincent Price that you might not even know exists, as the Geena Davis, Jeff Goldblum, David Cronenberg version is much more famous, and for a good reason. In both, a scientist tests a teleporter on himself and accidentally lets a fly into the chamber, allowing their DNA to get spliced with the pest. But where the 1950s one splits the scientist into two beings, a man with a large fly head and a fly with a man head, the 1980s one has the transformation happen slowly and disgustingly throughout the film. It's an intense study in body horror that, quite frankly, grosses me out a lot, but it's still an excellent movie that all horror fans should see. That limit. Number 2, Susperia. Let me be clear. I love the original Susperia. Love it, love it, love it. When I saw they were making a remake, I was like, why? The original is incredible. Argento for life. But wow, was this movie fantastic. It's a different animal altogether, showing love for the original without being a shot-for-shot remake. And every change they make is what makes the movie so great. I loved how the remake illustrated the connection between the witchcraft and the dance academy, and how it used choreography to paint some of the most haunting imagery I've ever seen in a film. Both have incredible set designs, great atmosphere, a fantastic soundtrack, but I might have to admit that the remake might actually be the better movie. Still, Both of these movies are up there on my list of favorite horror films of all time. And here are some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut. Funny Games. Basically, the director made a shot-for-shot remake of his Austrian film into English because he intended it to be a message to American audiences. Hard to mess up there. The Omen. This remake is a little bland, but also inoffensive. You just can't top the original. Quarantine. Basically the same found footage zombie flick. The original is definitely better, but the remake is a serviceable adaptation. The Blob. Gains points for the gore, loses points for no theme song. The Crazies. Good old-fashioned madness plague, and whether it's the gritty Romero version or the smoother remake, it gives you everything you're looking for out of that premise. And the #1 best horror movie remake of all time is... Number 1, The Thing. The Thing from Another World isn't a terrible film. It's no Susperia, but it holds up as a slice of sci-fi 50s cheese. Still, you gotta give it up to John Carpenter for improving and expanding upon this story about an Antarctic experimental station coming in contact with a sinister alien race. The design of the creature is terrifying, and the effects were masterfully ahead of their time. The shape-shifting premise also adds an element of suspense that makes this a fantastic combination of sci-fi horror, body horror, and psychological horror. This one gets all the thumbs up. 10 out of 10 spookies for sure. So those are my personal top 13 favorite horror movie remakes. Let me know yours in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Follow me at GhostessSpooky on Twitter and SpookyGhostess on Instagram. Join me next time, and boo for now.